I reached my grandfather's mountain cabin just as the first light of dawn touched the peaks. The air was thin and freezing, but it felt like the only thing keeping me alive. I found the spare key hidden under a loose stone by the porch. As I stepped inside, the smell of old pine and dust greeted me. I collapsed onto the floor, my body finally giving up after the miles of walking. I wasn't just Sarah the teacher anymore. I was a ghost preparing for a war. After a few hours of restless sleep, I woke up to the sound of a hawk screaming outside. My hands were blistered and my lungs felt like they were filled with glass shards. I found an old first aid kit and bandaged my wounds with trembling fingers. Looking in the cracked bathroom mirror, I saw the soot-stained face of a woman who had lost everything. But beneath the pain, there was a spark of something sharp and dangerous. I realized that my survival was Richard's biggest nightmare. I turned on an old battery-powered radio and searched for the local news. The reporter's voice was somber. A tragic fire destroyed a luxury penthouse in the hills last night. Authorities believe Sarah Miller, wife of prominent developer Richard Miller, perished in the blaze. Mr. Miller is said to be inconsolable. I turned it off with a bitter laugh. Inconsolable? He was probably picking out the color of his new Ferrari with Brenda at that very moment. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever without resources. I had a small emergency fund hidden in a floorboard, $5,000 in cash that I had saved over the years. I also had my grandfather's old laptop. I spent the next 2 days hacking into our joint cloud storage from a secure VPN. I needed to find that video Richard was filming. If I could prove he was watching the fire instead of helping, I would have him. But he was too smart to upload it to a shared drive. I realized that Brenda was the weak link. She was greedy and impulsive, the opposite of Richard's cold calculation. I remembered that Brenda used a specific app for her private photos, and she often used my birthday as her backup password, a pathetic attempt at irony. I tried it, and the folder opened. My heart stopped. There were dozens of photos of her and Richard in our house, in our bed, and even at the site of the fire weeks before it actually happened. They had planned the accident for months. One photo showed a blueprint of our penthouse with red circles around the smart lock sensors. They had intentionally bypassed the safety overrides to ensure I couldn't get out. This wasn't just insurance fraud.
No.
It was a cold-blooded execution. I felt a surge of nausea, followed by a terrifyingly calm clarity. I didn't just want them in jail. I wanted them to feel the same walls closing in on them that I felt that night. I decided to start a game of psychological shadows. I used a burner phone to send a message to Brenda's private number. It was a single image, a photo of the brass lamp I had used to break the window sitting on the cabin's wooden table. No text, no explanation. I knew she would recognize it immediately. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. I wanted the silence to be the loudest thing in her world. Next, I targeted Richard. I knew he was planning a massive press conference to announce a memorial foundation in my name, a classic move to boost his public image. Before the insurance payout, I waited until the day of the event. While he stood before the cameras, pretending to wipe away tears, I sent a file to his personal tablet. It was the audio recording of him saying the insurance will pay out by Monday, which I had captured on my phone while hiding in the bushes. From my cabin, I watched a live stream of the press conference. Richard's face went from grief-stricken to ghostly pale in a matter of seconds. He fumbled with his tablet, his hands shaking so violently that he nearly dropped it. He cut the speech short and rushed off the stage, leaving the reporters confused. I felt a grim satisfaction. The fire was starting to burn his world now, and he had no idea where the matches were coming from. I contacted a lawyer I had known since childhood, someone Richard had always looked down upon. "David, I'm alive," I said when he picked up. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Sarah? The news said you were... Everyone thinks you're dead." I told him everything, from the smell of the smoke to the kiss Brenda gave Richard while the house burned. I don't want a divorce, David. I want a funeral for his career and a prison cell for his future. David moved quickly and quietly. We spent the next week gathering every piece of digital evidence I had uncovered. We found that Richard had taken out a new life insurance policy on me just 30 days before the fire. The payout was $5 million. Everything was lining up. But we needed one more thing: the physical phone Richard used to film the fire. That phone was the smoking gun, the piece of evidence that would make the case impossible to beat in court. I knew where he would hide it. Richard had a safe in his office that he thought I never knew the code to. He used the date of his first big project's completion, a date he considered his true birthday. I decided it was time to return to Seattle. I put on a dark wig, glasses, and a heavy coat. I looked like a stranger, even to myself. I arrived at his office building late at night, knowing the security guard was someone I had tutored years ago. "I'm here to drop off documents for Mr. Miller," I said, keeping my head down. The guard didn't even look up from his magazine. I used my old key card, which hadn't been deactivated yet. Richard's arrogance was his undoing. The office was cold and smelled of expensive leather. I walked straight to the safe behind the painting of the Seattle skyline. My fingers shook as I punched in the code. Click. The heavy door swung open, revealing the dark truth of his life. Inside the safe was the phone, several passports with fake names for him and Brenda, and a stack of cash. I grabbed the phone and a small ledger that detailed his illegal payoffs to city inspectors. Just as I was about to leave, the office door opened. I froze. The lights flickered on, and there stood Richard. He wasn't wearing a suit. He looked disheveled and frantic. He stared at me, his eyes widening as he slowly recognized the woman in the wig. "Sarah?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He looked like he had seen a ghost, which I suppose he had. I didn't move. I held the phone up so he could see it. "You should have checked the bushes, Richard," I said, my voice as cold as the Seattle rain. "You should have made sure I was actually inside before you started filming your masterpiece." He took a step toward me, his face twisting into a mask of desperation. "I can explain, Sarah. I did it for us." "For us? Or for Brenda?" I asked, backing away toward the window. "You locked the doors, Richard. You tried to burn me alive for a check." He lunged at me, but I was faster. It sprayed him with the small canister of pepper spray I had brought. While he screamed and clawed at his eyes, I ran out of the office and down the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached David's car waiting in the alley. "I have it," I panted, showing him the phone. "Let's go." The next morning, the police raided Richard's office and Brenda's apartment. The video on the phone was even more damning than I had imagined. It showed Richard laughing as the roof collapsed. The evidence of mortgage fraud and the fake passports made the case a national sensation. Brenda tried to pin everything on Richard, and Richard tried to blame Brenda. They turned on each other like starving wolves, exactly as I knew they would. While they were in custody, I sat in David's office, finally wearing my own clothes and my own hair. The news was filled with images of Richard and Brenda in handcuffs. "What now, Sarah?" David asked, handing me a cup of coffee. I looked out at the city. "Now I go back to work," I said. "I have students who need me, and a mountain cabin that needs a new garden." I felt a strange sense of lightness. The smoke had finally cleared from my life. I didn't take the insurance money. I directed it to a fund for victims of domestic violence and arson. I didn't want a single penny that was stained with Richard's greed. I moved back into my modest childhood home, the one I had almost sold to help Richard. It felt warm and safe. I started a small garden in the backyard, planting roses and lavender. Every time I dug into the soil, I felt like I was burying a piece of the nightmare that had nearly consumed me. Richard and Brenda were sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole. They had lost their wealth, their reputations, and their freedom. I heard that Brenda had lost all her hair due to stress, and Richard was a shadow of his former self. I didn't feel joy at their suffering. I just felt finished. The debt was paid. The fire was out. I was no longer a character in their twisted story. I was the author of my own beautiful future. 1 year after the fire, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset over the Sound. I was a different woman than the one who had woken up in that smoky bedroom. I was stronger, wiser, and more careful with my heart. I had learned that love shouldn't be a sacrifice of one's soul, and that trust is a gift that must be earned every day. I smiled, feeling the cool breeze on my face. My name is Sarah, and I am a survivor. I returned to teaching, and my students welcomed me with a standing ovation. They had followed the news, and they saw me as a hero. But I told them that I was just a person who refused to stay in the fire. I taught them about resilience and the importance of standing up for the truth. I realized that my voice was more powerful than any architect's blueprint. I was building something that wouldn't burn, a legacy of hope for everyone who felt trapped. I eventually visited the site of the penthouse. It was a vacant lot now, covered in weeds and debris. I stood there for a long time, remembering the heat and the fear. I took a single stone from the foundation and threw it into the distance. "I'm done with you," I whispered. I turned my back on the ruins and walked away, not looking back once. The past was a pile of ashes, and I was a phoenix who had finally learned how to fly above the clouds. My relationship with my family became deeper and more honest. They had almost lost me, and they didn't take a single moment for granted anymore. We spent our weekends at the mountain cabin, hiking and sharing stories. My mother's laughter filled the rooms that had once been silent. I realized that the things that truly matter aren't the luxury apartments or the expensive cars. It's the love that remains when everything else is stripped away. I met a man named Sam, a quiet carpenter who worked with his hands and spoke with his heart. He didn't care about my past or the headlines. He just cared about the way I looked at the stars. We spent our evenings building furniture for my house, the smell of fresh wood replacing the memory of smoke. He was the opposite of Richard in every way. He was honest, kind, and he never tried to lock a door that I wanted to keep open. It was a new kind of love. One evening, Sam asked me why I always kept a small brass lamp on my nightstand. I looked at the lamp, the same one I had used to break the window. "It's a reminder," I said, touching the cold metal. "A reminder that I have the power to break any glass that tries to hold me back." He nodded, not needing any more explanation. He took my hand, and in that moment, I knew that the fire had only served to forge something that could never be broken again. I started a support group for women who had experienced financial and emotional abuse. We met every Tuesday in the community center. I listened to their stories and I saw my own reflection in their eyes. We shared our strength and our resources, creating a network of safety that reached across the city. I was no longer just a teacher of English. I was a teacher of survival. We were a forest of trees that had survived a fire, growing stronger together. Richard tried to write me letters from prison, filled with excuses and pleas for forgiveness. I never opened them. I put them in a box, and once a year, I had a small bonfire in my backyard. I watched the paper turn to ash, the words disappearing into the night air. It was my own ritual of release. I didn't need his apologies to move on. I had already forgiven myself for being fooled, and that was the only forgiveness that actually mattered in the end. The mountain cabin became a sanctuary for many people. I offered it as a temporary home for those who needed a place to hide and heal. I saw the light come back into their eyes, the same way it had come back into mine. I realized that my trauma had become a tool for healing others. My grandfather would have been proud to see his old cabin used this way. It was a place of transformation, a place where the air was always clear and the stars were always bright. I am 40 years old now, and my life is full of peace. I have a daughter of my own, a girl with red hair and eyes that spark with intelligence. I tell her stories of bravery and truth. I teach her that she is the master of her own destiny and that no one can ever take her light away. We walk in the garden together, picking roses and breathing in the scent of cedar and rain. I am Sarah, and I have found the life I was always meant to live. The city of Seattle changed for me over the years. It was no longer a city of betrayal, but a city of second chances. I loved the way the rain washed the streets clean every afternoon. I loved the sound of the foghorns on the Sound. I felt a deep connection to the rhythm of the city, a sense of belonging that I had never felt when I was trying to fit into Richard's perfect world. I was a part of the city's heart now, a thread in its complex and beautiful fabric. Sam and I eventually got married in a small ceremony at the mountain cabin. There were no cameras, no press, and no expensive catering. Just a few friends, some local wildflowers, and the sound of the wind in the pines. I wore a simple white dress and felt more beautiful than I ever had in a designer gown. When we said our vows, I knew that every word was true. We weren't building an empire. We were building a home based on respect and love. I received a letter from David one afternoon. He had been appointed as a judge, and he wanted me to speak at his swearing-in ceremony. I stood in the courtroom, the same place where I had once fought for my life. I spoke about the importance of justice and the courage it takes to speak the truth in a world that often prefers a comfortable lie. I looked at David and saw the pride in his eyes. We had come a long way from that dark alley and the burner phone. My garden in the childhood home grew into a local landmark. People would stop by to see the roses and the lavender, often asking for advice on how to grow such vibrant flowers. I told them that the secret was in the soil and the patience to let things grow at their own pace. I realized that my life was like that garden. It had been cleared by fire, but the soil was rich and full of potential. I was a gardener of my own soul, tending to the beauty that remained. One day, I saw Brenda's name in the news again. She had been denied parole for the third time. The article mentioned that she spent her days in the prison library, staring at the walls. I felt a brief moment of sadness for the woman she could have been if she hadn't let greed consume her. But I quickly let the feeling go. Her choices were her own, and my life was no longer connected to hers in any way. I turned the page and focused on the sunrise. My daughter, little Elena, asked me about the fire once. She had seen a photo of the old penthouse in a book about Seattle's history. I sat her down and told her the truth, in words she could understand. I told her that sometimes people do bad things because they are lost, but that the most important thing is to stay brave and find your way back to the light. She hugged me tight and said, "You're the bravest mommy in the world." That was all I needed to hear. I started writing my memoirs, not for the fame, but to document the journey. I wanted to leave a record for Elena so she would know exactly who her mother was. I wrote about the fear, the anger, and the ultimate peace I had found. I titled the book, The Phoenix's Silence. It wasn't a story of revenge, but a story of reclamation. It was a story about how a woman can lose her home and her husband, but find herself in the process. It was a labor of love. Sam and I spent our summers traveling across the country in an old camper van. We saw the Grand Canyon, the redwood forests, and the rolling plains of the Midwest. We met people from all walks of life, each with their own stories of survival and hope. I realized that the world is much bigger and more beautiful than the narrow world of luxury and status I had once lived in. I felt a sense of freedom that was as wide and endless as the open road ahead of us. My mother passed away peacefully at the age of 85. She died in the house where she had raised me, surrounded by the people who loved her. In her final moments, she took my hand and whispered, "I'm so glad you stayed, Sarah. You made the world a better place." I realized then that my survival wasn't just for me. It was for all the people whose lives I had touched. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life I had been given back by the stars. I am 50 years old now, and I still teach English at the high school. I love the way a good book can open a student's mind to new possibilities. I see the same spark of intelligence and curiosity in their eyes that I see in Elena's. I teach them to be critical thinkers and to always question the world around them. I am a mentor, a mother, and a wife. But most of all, I am a woman who is at peace with her past and excited for her future in the world. The Mountain Cabin has become a hub for a local artist collective. We host workshops and exhibitions, filling the rooms with creativity and color. I love the way the old pine walls look when they are covered in paintings and photographs. It's a place where people can come to express themselves and find their own voices. I realize that the cabin has a life of its own now, a legacy of healing and inspiration that will continue long after I am gone. I recently visited the prison where Richard is held, not to speak to him, but to attend a meeting about educational programs for inmates. I saw him from a distance across the yard. He was old, thin, and moved with a heavy, slow gait. He didn't see me, and I didn't want him to. I felt a strange sense of distance, as if he were a character from a book I had read a long time ago. He had no power over me anymore. He was just a man in a gray uniform. My memoirs were published and became a source of strength for many people. I received letters from all over the world, each one a testament to the power of resilience. I realized that my story wasn't just my own. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt the heat of a fire and the sting of a betrayal. I felt a deep sense of connection to the human experience, a sense of being a part of something much larger than myself. I was a voice in a choir of truth. Sam and I bought a small boat and spent our weekends sailing on the Sound. I loved the way the wind fell in my hair and the salt on my skin. The water was a place of endless motion and constant change, a reminder that life is always moving forward. I felt a deep sense of serenity as we glided over the waves, the city skyline a distant and beautiful memory. I was at home on the water, just as I was at home in the mountains and in the city of Seattle. Elena is a teenager now, a girl with a fierce spirit and a kind heart. She wants to be a lawyer, like David, and fight for the rights of the vulnerable. She has a deep sense of justice and a sharp mind that can see through any lie. I am so proud of the woman she is becoming. I know that she will make the world a better place and that she will always stand up for what is right. She is my greatest achievement, a living legacy of my own survival and hope. I am 60 years old now, and I still wake up early to work in my garden. The roses are in full bloom, and the lavender is a sea of purple. I feel a deep sense of contentment as I look at the beauty I have created. My life is a masterpiece of my own making, a tapestry of joy and pain, of loss and reclamation. I have lived fully, loved deeply, and found the strength to be myself in a world that often tries to change us. I am finally, gloriously, completely free. I recently returned to the site of the fire one last time. A beautiful new community garden had been built on the lot, a place where people could come to grow their own food and share their own stories. I saw children playing among the vegetable patches and old people sitting on the benches, enjoying the sun. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The place of my greatest trauma had become a place of community and growth. The fire was truly and finally over. Sam and I celebrated our 25th anniversary at the Mountain Cabin. We sat on the porch and watched the stars, just as we had done on our wedding night. "We did it, Sarah," he said, taking my hand. "We built a life that is full of truth and love." I looked at him and smiled, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine. "Yes, we did," I whispered. We were two people who had found each other in the shadows and built a world of light together. It was a good life. My daughter Elena graduated from law school with honors. I stood in the audience and watched her walk across the stage, her red hair shining in the light. She looked so strong and confident, a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted to do. I felt a surge of pride that brought tears to my eyes. She was the future, a future that was bright and full of possibility. She was the reason I had fought so hard to survive that night in the fire. I am 70 years old now, and I spend my days riding in my cabin. The air is still clear and the stars are still bright. I feel a deep sense of peace with my life and with the world. I have no regrets, not even for the fire. It was the moment that changed everything, the moment that forced me to find my own strength and my own voice. I am grateful for every breath I take and for every moment of love I have shared with the people in my life today. Richard passed away in prison a few months ago. I didn't feel any joy or sadness at the news. It was just a fact, a final period at the end of a long and difficult sentence. I didn't attend his funeral, and I didn't visit his grave. He was a part of a past that I had long ago released. I focused instead on the beauty of the present, on the laughter of my grandchildren and the warmth of Sam's hand in mine. I was a woman who was looking forward, always. My life has been a long and winding road, but it has led me to exactly where I was meant to be. I have found my home, my family, and my voice. I have learned that the most important thing is to be true to oneself and to never let anyone take your power away. I am Sarah, a woman who survived a fire and found a life that is full of light and beauty. I am a survivor, a teacher, a mother, and a friend. And I am finally, completely, and gloriously happy. I recently received an award for my work with the foundation I started. Standing on the stage, I looked out at the faces of all the people we had helped. I saw their strength and their resilience, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I realized that my story was just a part of a much larger story of hope and reclamation. I was a voice in a choir of truth, a thread in a tapestry of survival. I felt a deep sense of belonging to the human experience. Sam and I still take our camper van out on the open road. We love the way the world changes with every mile, the new landscapes, and the new people we meet. We are always looking for the next adventure, the next opportunity to learn and grow. Life is a gift that we don't take for granted, a journey that we are enjoying every single step of the way. We are two travelers on a beautiful road, and we are happy to be moving forward together in the world. My grandchildren love to visit me at the mountain cabin. They call me Grand Sarah, and they love to hear my stories of bravery and hope. I tell them that the world is big and beautiful, and that they have the power to make it even better. I teach them to be kind and honest, and to always stand up for what is right. I see the same spark of intelligence and curiosity in their eyes that I saw in Elena's. They are the future, and I am so proud of them. I recently finished my final book, a collection of letters to my grandchildren. I wanted to leave a record of my thoughts and my hopes for their future. I wrote about the importance of resilience, the beauty of the natural world, and the power of love. I titled the book Letters from the Cabin. It is a labor of love, a bridge between my life and theirs. I hope that they will find strength and inspiration in its pages long after I am gone from here. I am 80 years old now, and I still work in my garden in Seattle. The roses are still in full bloom, and the lavender is still a sea of purple. I feel a deep sense of contentment as I look at the beauty I have created. My life is a masterpiece of my own making, a tapestry of joy and pain, of loss and reclamation. I have lived fully, loved deeply, and found the strength to be myself in a world that often tries to change us. I am finally, truly home. Sam passed away peacefully in his sleep last winter. I miss him every day, but I feel his presence in the house and in the garden. I feel his love in the way the stars look at night, and in the way the wind sounds in the pines. He was the greatest gift I ever received, a partner who loved me for exactly who I was. I am grateful for every moment we shared and for the life we built together. He will always be a part of me, a light in my own heart. My daughter Elena is now a respected judge, and my grandchildren are all successful in their own right. They are good people, honest and kind, and they make the world a better place every day. I feel a deep sense of pride in the legacy I have left behind. It's not a legacy of wealth or status, but a legacy of strength and truth. I am Sarah, and I have found the life I was always meant to live. I am at peace with my past and my future in the world today. Tonight, I am sitting on the porch of the mountain cabin, watching the sun set over the peaks. The air is clear and the stars are starting to come out. I feel a deep sense of serenity. Skada hitea. I have lived a long and full life, a life of challenges and triumphs, of loss and reclamation. I am ready for whatever comes next, knowing that I have been true to myself and to the people I love. I am finally, gloriously, and completely free. I am just Sarah,